Wonderful. Why this topic on emotional intelligence, but the character way of doing this? And I want to take you back to my story at the business school, where I asked the dean, what about emotional intelligence? And his feedback to me was simple. If students can't take the heat, they must get out of the kitchen. And I realized, yes, I understand, but there's something missing. So we debated the whole thing about IQ and EQ. Why is IQ so important and what is it all about? But what about EQ? And based on that, I decided, well, let me go and do some research. And I've been over to Chicago, done some courses on emotional intelligence. And on my way back, I realized I've got something. So again, I approached the university and I said, let's discuss this. And the feedback to me was simple. Listen, wait. Don't take chances. This is an MBA program. So what happened? I asked them, can we do an elective? And they said yes. And this was the starting point for something that I'm going to discuss today also. Because as the students walk into the class, I said to them, you've got one assignment and there's one reference. And immediately the feedback was, this is going to be an easy elective. And I said, yes, one assignment with one elective. And then specifically, some students asked me, what do you, just explain why one reference? And so listen, this time, we're not going to fix the world. We're not going to fix our country. We're not going to fix our organization. But what I want you to do is to think about, why do you have a low or high EQ? Where is it coming from? And you are the one reference. That's why we call it one assignment with one reference. And so that to me was the starting point. And then I asked those students, come and present your EQ assessment and results in front of the rest of the group. And I've learned something about cowboys don't cry in front of their own horses. Lots of those students were sitting there. So, well, Mario, this is why I've got a low EQ. This is why I've got a low self-regard. And then I said, so where is it coming from? What are the reasons for this? And some of the guys said, well, I've been born on the other side of the railroad. And I said, what do you mean by that? And that was the starting point for this powerful course on emotional intelligence. So, and I'm going to take you through some of these questions and some of these topics, because the first one that I want to discuss, it's all about self-regard. What is self-regard? Self-regard is about, how do you feel about yourself? Are you okay? Yes or no? And it's amazing that a lot of people still deep down, sometimes when you talk to them, they don't feel good about themselves or where they are, and they've got a low self-regard. So I'm asking the question, if you do have a low self-regard, let's talk about it. Where is it coming from? Why don't you have that level of respect and don't understand your own identity? You see, with EQ, you can measure it from 50 to 130. Even sometimes a little bit higher. So if you do have a low EQ, I'm always saying, hey, let's do something about it. But if you do have a high EQ, I'm always saying, but that's also dangerous, because sometimes you do get people, they are always say, top of the world. I'm thinking of one person one day, he said to me, I'm asking him the question, how are you today? He said, top of the world. And I'm saying, top of the world, yes. What if I put a gun against your heart and I pull the trigger? How do you... He said, top of the world. I said, no, man. You know, sometimes those are very plastic and insincere. So the first one is about self-regard. But you've got to be very careful for things like verbal abuse. Because verbal abuse is often the start of, sometimes I'm feeling worthless, I don't fit in, I'm not good enough. So we need to work on those type of things also. And I believe even this professional bullying could be maybe one of the areas that we can address one day. So what do I see in the workplace? You see people who are committed, and you sometimes see people who are not committed. The committed people are often committed about their work, but sometimes not committed about the organization, or vice versa. And you got to ask yourself, where is it coming from? What are the reasons? And one possible reason is maybe sometimes there's self-awareness. Are they able to express feelings? Can they talk about the emotions? And you know, a subject like emotional intelligence, it's not just a subject, like we call it sometimes, it's a soft issue. And I want to give you a good example. Lecturing in France at one stage, a prestigious university, as I walk in there with the summer school, they said, please don't put two students together. I said, why not? I said, no, the one student is coming from America and a dad sponsored the program. The other one is from India. There's constant fighting and disagreement. And I decided, well, this is my session, this is my class. It is about emotional intelligence. So as I walk in, I asked this one student from India, I said, well, listen, tell me about what's the vibe and what's the latest. He said, please, don't put me with that other person. And I realized there's a problem. But when I look at his EQ, I realize his emotional self-awareness as well as his interpersonal skills are low. And I decided I want to give him feedback. So that night, sit down with him, give him feedback. But I pick up, I'm missing him. And then I said to him, listen, the next morning, please let's start again. If there's anything else, let's talk about it. So as I walk into the class the next morning, guess what happened? This guy was waiting for me. And I realized, no, I don't want to start another discussion or even a disagreement. So I said to him, so what happened last night? He said, I phoned my dad in India. And I explained to him your feedback. And you said to me, I'm low in interpersonal, low in self-awareness and all these type of things. And and I said, and what was the feedback? His father said, all the years I've told you, you need to work on this and you need to work on this. Who is this guru? You don't even know you, telling you what are your situation and your EQ. And I said, please take him out for an Indian dinner that night. And we were eating and we were loving that specific night. Why? Because it was emotional awareness and emotional intelligence. So that to me is very important. So I want to ask you also, if you think about feelings like anger and disappointment, embarrassment, we can talk about these type of things. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a way to do it, but that's also measuring your emotional intelligence. And then another one, assertiveness. Are you assertive or are you aggressive on the other hand? It's so important. Sometimes you want to say no to a person. You're not able to say no. And that's all about assertiveness. Assertiveness is really helping us to express your feelings. You're sitting in a team, you want to disagree. You don't want to attack the person, or are you going to keep on avoiding the issues? So that's all about assertiveness. The fourth one on emotional intelligence is independence. Can you stand on your own? Or do you keep on relying on other people? So if you are in a project and you keep on relying on other people, it's great to do that. But what about your role? What about you standing out? What about you taking the initiative? So that's all about independence. And I'm going to give you a couple of practical examples also towards the end, but that's independence. So independence for me is about where do you stand? What about your personal values and what do you see? But the last one in terms of this first five is all about your self-actualization. A big word, but it's all about, are you feeling meaningful or meaningless? How do you feel about yourself? What are your accomplishments? What have you achieved so far? So when you do an EQ assessment, you do assess each and every individual. But the good news, I've started with that, you can develop your EQ. I'm thinking of another example, and I've learned so much talking to some German students at one stage at Leipzig and Dortmund. And I said, today I'm going to start doing a course on emotional intelligence. And the feedback is, listen, we've been through World War I and World War II. We don't talk about our emotions. And I realized this is nonsense. This is, you missed something. And I said, well, you guys love soccer and all that stuff. What happened last time when you've lost the World Cup and all this stuff? And why were you so disappointed and all that stuff? I said, that's about your feelings. That's about your emotions. So please, this is a crucial subject. And that's why I'm always saying you can't go to a medical doctor only to check for your heart lungs. He must do what I call even an emotional checkup. So please have a look at these concepts and measure it. I'm going to give you a couple of very practical examples also right at the end. But also in the next session, I'm going to talk about emotional hackers. Why is it so that we've got a mind drive and a hard drive? And why do we talk about always fixing the stuff here from what I call from the cognitive side? We want to buy new books, but the virus is not sitting here. The virus is sitting in your heart. And if you don't fix that, I know where is it coming from. So I'm going to be very practical also in my next session. So the first couple of words that we've highlighted in definitions about intrapersonal, but then we move into interpersonal EQ. And interpersonal things like empathy. Put yourself in that specific position. And you know what's happening in the world. Put yourself in that position. And it's not about sympathy. It's like, just put yourself in that position. And it's not an easy one, because sometimes we talk about downsizing, right-sizing, retrenchments, and it's just a way of pressing the button. I'm saying, no, put yourself in that specific position. So empathy is all about that involvement, that sensitivity to realize this is tough. If you think about COVID and all these type of things the last couple of years, put yourself in that position, and it's not easy. Now, I want to use a practical example that's familiar maybe to some people, but I call it the example of the prodigal son. Why this specific example? Listen to the 10 steps and you will pick up feelings. The first one is about the request. So typically his first response was, listen, come on, I need the share of the money. Now, you can argue, was it assertive? Was it aggressive? Okay. And then there was definitely rebellion. Listen, great, I'm going to enjoy my life. That's the rebellion side. The third one is he suddenly realized there's a repercussion. You can't just enjoy it. What about if your money is running out? You can see the feelings there. The fourth one is rejection. In other words, no one is looking after me. I'm sitting here, I've got big food to eat, and that's not what I'm supposed to do at the end of the day. And then there was a realization. In other words, he came to his senses. He realized, I got to do something. So that was the first 4 or 5, what I call emotions. And then there was a resolution. I will go back to my Father. And one of the things that I'm going to discuss also later on is this thing of resilience. Because what if you've got a low EQ? Can you do something about it? And then there was repentance. Repentance, well, listen, I've done wrong and I'm not going to carry on the way that I've done it in the past. Brilliant thoughts. But then after repentance, there's reconciliation. And I know that's not easy. But that's so much. Think about it, that emotion, that reconciliation. And then there's redemption, and then finally rejoicing. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant examples of a person going through a tough time, and you can just see the emotions as you work through the different phases and stages. But then back to empathy. Can you put yourself in that position? It's different. But I want to move on to the next one, is interpersonal relationships. Why is it so that you're unable sometimes to show affection? You're not a cheerful person. There's no fun. There's no joy. And it's often the problem when you work in employees in the environment. There's not enough what I call making deposits in another person's life. You are on your own. You're not a very high interpersonal person. So keep that in mind. That's the next concept that I want to highlight. Why is it so important? And then very important, a part of interpersonal relationships is all about trust. Can you really trust your significant other, your colleague, your boss, your immediate senior? That is vital. Now, I want to take you, because we're talking about interpersonal skills and we're talking about empathy, I want to take you through a case study. I've asked my students, talk to me about, the happiest day in your life. Now listen to this. I'm just going to repeat this story because this is brilliant. And I'm using this as one of my case studies. Listen to the words. This student typed it out for me, and these are the words. I said, my journey took me to Klerksdorp in Northwest Province. It was my first congregation. Everybody told me not to visit Api as it would be a waste of time. Now listen to the word. He said, don't visit that person. They call him Api. He is beyond redemption. They said, divorced and battered by alcohol in life in general, he had given up. He didn't want to be disturbed by anyone. Now listen to the feelings. So this person said, I'm going to visit him, and listen to the next paragraph. One evening, I decided to pay him a visit. I love that. Put yourself in that position. He was very hostile at first, especially after hearing that I was the new dominee, a youngest out of varsity, and then he called this new dominee a snotkop. Now, I'm not sure how to translate that word, but it's just saying, you're like a waste of time. Don't waste your time. I would rather say, Dominic, give him a snort club, but that's another way. But this is not good empathy. But so this was real. But listen to this next case. Something happened. However, RP and I connected that night. Brilliant, connected. We spent hours together the following week, and he opened up as if I were his best friend. Can you see the interpersonal, the empathy? To everybody's surprise, RP was back in the church the following Sunday. Isn't it brilliant? But now listen to his closing paragraph. 1 month later, RP and I were back at the church. He in a coffin in a black hearse, and at the front door, I am at the pulpit delivering his funeral service, the happiest day of my life. That day I realized that a smile, an ear to listen, a shoulder to cry on, something small and seemingly insignificant could change people, could change the world. When we laid him to rest in the local graveyard later that day, I smiled because RP had gone home and had been ready to go. You see, this is what I call emotional intelligence. It's about your social responsibility. It's about getting involved, all these type of things that we've discussed so far. So I'm asking you the question, where do you stand? Do you have a balanced life? Is it only about IQ? What about EQ? And I cannot close this session without just saying a couple of words from what I've learned from a Nelson Mandela. And this is so powerful. Listen to the EQ comments in this session. Number one is, if the criticism is valid, it must be made. Next one, anger is a temporary feeling. You soon forget it, particularly if you are involved in positive activities and attitudes. You just feel that EQ side. On determination, as long as you have an iron will, you can turn misfortune into advantage. And on his family, one of my greatest pleasures is to sit down with my children, listen to them, to listen to their hopes and aspirations. Powerful EQ statements. And then listen to this one. The wounds that cannot be seen are more painful than those treated by a doctor. It's all about EQ. On leadership, it is important to surround yourself with strong and independent personalities who will tell you when you are getting old. That's a message for us in Africa also. And on love, the world is truly around and seems to start and end with those we love. Full of EQ, very powerful thoughts. So I want to just leave these thoughts with you. Please take EQ seriously. It's like taking your car for a service, taking your EQ seriously and decide where are the gaps and what you can do to make a difference. Go and make a difference and be blessed.